Hey class, this is Charles Evelyn with a recording here from my research project for front-end developments, or front-end frameworks, I'm sorry. Um, One of the things I noticed that while I was looking up different front-end frameworks through Google here, I found that one particular site had a particular take on front-end frameworks. They mentioned some of the ones that's used here, or some of the ones that we've encountered. Semantic Bootstrap is one of the popular ones, Foundation, and a couple of these, as you can see, less. Uh, some of these I haven't heard of, but just boilerplates here, the Golden Grid. And one thing that came up that really caught my eye, um, we've been doing a lot of development level frameworks or development style frameworks, and I thought I would look into one of the design frameworks. And one of the ones that we've probably seen before has been the 960 grid system. So I looked into that. Since most of us are actually doing development style frameworks, I figured I'd take a look at the design framework and see what that had to offer. So I decided to do my presentation on the 960 grid system. So here is the 960 grid system's home site, website. It's 960.gs. And what it is a framework that allows you to um, quickly prototype or prototype um, your website design in the conception phase. And so, of course, there's a download button here. Can't miss that. And you look at the site and it talks about some of the things that the grid system will do for you. Um, and there's some discussions here that talks about the grid system itself. It can be obviously it's on the based on the 960 pixel grid that used to be the standard for web design. Of course, with um, modern browsers and the numerous devices that are out there, there are more um, dimensions and sizes of devices and viewports that designers and developers can develop for. And so, before we get into that a little bit, I'm sure some of you have seen this already, but I wanted to take a brief overview of some of the sites that have been created using the 960 grid system. There's some Drupal sites here. You see Sony Music has one, and I'm sure most of you have seen this before, but I'm just going to scroll down a little bit just to show you some of the things that the 960 grid system will enable you to do. Um, they talk about 16 column grids, 12 column grids, and there's some of the sites that are using examples that have been created with the 960 grid system. And so from there, um, I went into one of my older projects that I started a couple years ago after learning about the 960 grid system, just playing around with it and seeing what I could do. And so I came up with, well, before I get into the project itself, once you download the file for the 960 grid, you could use it in various vector programs such as Illustrator. And what you get is when you start off, you get this is the basic grid system here. And all it is just the actual layers. Actually, I think it's called grid or columns. When you first get it, you can change the name once you've downloaded it and started using it in your own projects. But this is the grid system. This is what it looks like. This is a 16 column grid, and it gives you the columns, and then on the left and right of each column there's a gutter, uh, and I believe that's 10 pixels width for each gutter on each side. So you have 10 pixels here and 10 pixels here, and then your column in the middle. And so this was the basic 16 column grid format that you get when you download the 16 or when you use the 16 grid file. And some of the things that I have done with mine as I start to lay these things out This is a project that I was working on it a couple of years ago. Like I said, when I learned about the 960 grid system, and I just thought I would lay this out and see what that looked like. And so here is something. It's a prototype for project that I was working on. Like I said, didn't really get to flesh it out to a full comp. It was just something I had work laying in the background there. I figured I'd dust it off for this presentation and show it to you. And so this is basically what I have here. Just something for a project that I was working on. So what I did was when I drew this up for this project, I took the time to go ahead and try to build this out. And so here is the HTML for that. Just going to scroll through that a little bit. Well, just a basic form. It does not have, it's the more basic CSS, basic HTML. No development front-end frameworks have been put in place here. Here's the style sheet for that particular page. Basic HTML5 elements. There's a header, a couple of classes here. There's one div. There's a nav element. There's an aside and a section, an article, and a footer. And so what that looks like in HTML is this. And so what I've done was just throw something together. Like I said, it was a project that I was working on, and I left it to do other things. But I'll probably get back to it sooner or later. But this is basically what a site could look like going after this template design here. So I hope you can see the similarities between the two. Obviously, it needs to be fleshed out a little bit more, but it's something that I'm probably not really going to touch until after graduation, to be honest with you. So this is something what you can use the 960 grid system for. As you've seen on the site itself, they have a lot richer designs here that have been used, and eventually I will get to that point where we can actually do that. But this is just something that I thought would, I just pulled something off the old shelf and dusted it off and put some code to it to see if it'll work. One of the other types of systems, there's a fluid 960 grid system that has a little bit more as far as design, and you can see it's already interactive to some degree, and you can also use some of this as well instead of just the basic 960 grid system here. So like I said, I chose to do this one because it was on the design portion instead of the development portion. I hope it, I'm sure most of you guys have seen this before. Some of you guys probably use it, some of you don't. I don't intend to use it for every project in the future, but it is a good way to get something going. And if you wanted to give a client something just basic, or just even just mock up something for yourself, this would be a good way to get started with it, starting with your Illustrator file. And you could, of course, you'd probably have a full color comp for a client. But you can use this and quickly transition into a full color comp, and then once you go into your code, actually start developing it and fleshing it out, and then come to a website that at least it conveys some of the ideas that you have. I'm sure from here you can use some of the developmental frameworks like Angular, like Ember, or Bootstrap or whatever, and actually flesh this out a lot more. But this is just a basic example of what you can do, or how you can move from the prototype to from a prototype graphic to an actual HTML type page using the 960 grid system. So this has been my demo. I hope you like it, and have a good evening.